DreAllDay.com.
Now tuned in to the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there even when the success you've expected to achieve has yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative, which is the go-getter energy that moves all of us, including yourself, especially yourself, to go and make things happen instead of wait for things to happen. And we put all this together into one bundle, one package, one mindset, one method, one philosophy, one book, one masterclass. And this show, this daily show, yes, you didn't know, that means every day. This show is called Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. Today's topic is a question. Who are you willing to be? Now, give credit for this topic to Tucker Max, who is an author. He used to write these satire books, these funny books about college humor type of books about things he would do that involved alcohol and females, pretty much. Now he has evolved into the owner and one of the head people at a company called Scribe, which basically helps people publish their own books, helps people self-publish their own books, but really high quality books, at least according to how they pitch themselves. I haven't worked with them. I don't need them, but anyone who wants to write a book and you got the money to pay them, you may want to work with them. Maybe they know what they're doing. But I do read Tucker's articles. I stay up to date on the things that he's doing because I always, even back when he was writing the satire stuff that was all about drinking and sex, I could read in between the lines of the things that he was saying. This guy's actually a very keen observer of human beings. He's actually a very smart guy, even though the stuff he was talking about was very sophomoric. But anyway, I read Tucker Max say this in these series of short articles that he wrote, where he posts, where he writes about things that he's learned, and then he'll share like 5 or 10 things of things that he's learned. And one of the things that he says is, one of the questions that you have to ask yourself is, who are you willing to be in life? And it got me to thinking about the fact that even in my book, Work on Your Game, which you can get at workonyourgamebook.com, I talk about the be, do, have philosophy. And one of the questions that you have to ask yourself is, after you figure out what you want in life, and then you ask yourself what kind of actions you're going to have to take in order to get there. Some people call that planning or strategizing. Then you have to ask yourself, what type of person do I need to be? Who do I need to be in order to take these actions in order to get this type of result? If I'm going to become this type of lawyer or school teacher or parent or athlete or entrepreneur, what type of person do I need to be who is capable of taking these actions and executing on them and getting the results that I want? So anyway, who do I need to be to do what I need to do to have what I want to have? So you do it, you plan it out in backwards, but then you execute it moving forward. And that question, who do I need to be? I noticed that Tucker here is offering a counter question that he contends is actually more accurate. This is what he said. He said, people say, who do I need to be? But the better question is, who are you willing to be? Because you may answer the question, who you need to be, but you may not be willing to become that type of person. Who you need to be might be, you need to wake up every morning at 4 in the morning and you need to go to bed at 8 o'clock at night. Or you may need to drink more water, or you may need to cut alcohol out of your diet, or you may need to be a nicer, more caring person, or you may need to spend more time with your significant other, or you may need to dedicate more of your attention to your family, or you may need to quit hanging with those friends of yours who are bad influences. Those are all the things that you may need to do and the type of person you may need to be. But if you're not actually willing to be that person, then it doesn't really matter that those are what you need. No, it doesn't. So what is being offered here and what we're talking about here today is not what you need, but actually what are you willing to actually live up to? Because if you're not willing to live up to something, then it doesn't really matter that it's on a list of things that you need to do, right? And I like this question. So why not have both of these available? I think both questions have their merits. Both questions have their places in life. So we're going to make sure we address both of them. So we have answered the question, who do I need to be? Now we're going to answer the question, who am I willing to be? And the need to be question, let me see if I've actually done many masterclasses on who you need to be or why you need to be, but the just direct question, why you need to be, what kind of person do I need to be, is masterclass number 144 back in 2016. 144, the topic is, what kind of person do I need to be? So now, all the way up here, 1,400, 1,500 days later, we will answer the question, who am I willing to be? Point number one. When you ask the need to be question, you must follow it up with, which of these am I going to implement? So once you answer the question, who do I need to be? You're gonna get a list of things, a list of the type of person that you're gonna need to become, the type of changes that you're gonna need to make. Some of those changes will be things that you need to start doing. Some of those will be changes of things that you need to stop doing. Some of them will be changes of things that you are already doing and you will need to do more or less of, depending on what type of results they have been producing for you thus far. Now, once you get those answers, and there should be several answers, because you should just keep writing down answers. The more that they come to you, the more you should write them down. Now, once you have all the answers, now you got to ask yourself the question, which of these am I actually willing to implement? Which of these am I actually willing to become? Because it might say you might need to get more sleep. Are you actually willing to do that? It may say you need to stop eating candy. Are you willing to do that? It may say you need to stop hanging with, again, those bad influence friends. Are you willing to do that? It may say you need to start working on your side project business. You need to spend 2 hours every night after you get home from working from all day. You got to spend 2 hours working on that side project if you're going to turn this into a real business that can eventually replace your full-time income. Are you actually willing to do that? It may say you need to take your wife out on a date once a week so you can re-spark the relationship. Are you willing to do that? You may need to spend X amount of time with your kids so you can actually have a relationship with your kids nowadays. Are you willing to do this? Are you willing to implement these things and actually be this type of person? Those are the questions that you need to ask yourself, because having a list of the things that you may need to be is great, but you also need to get real with yourself. You also got to get clear with yourself, like how many of these are we actually going to bring in, how many of these are we actually going to bring to real life? Because if you wanted to, even if we talk about the do part of the be, do, have equation, and you listed out all the things you would need to do if you wanted to be a successful, let's say you wanted to be an entrepreneur. Right now, you have no kind of business going on whatsoever. So to do that, what are the things you need to do? First, you need to come up with an idea. You need to figure out who your audience is. You need to create a product or a service or some type of offering, or at least have access to some type of offering. You need to create some way that people can actually interact with you. You need to put yourself out there in some way so people know that you exist. You need to come up with a price for what it is you're offering. You need to create the full offer so people know exactly what they're getting. You need to come up with your sales pitch or marketing plan for how you're going to get in front of people and get their attention and tell them what you have going on. These are all things that you need to do. Once you start selling things, you need to fulfill the orders. You need to get people whatever it is that you sold them. You're going to have some customer service issues. You're going to need to deal with the customer service issues. You're going to probably need some enrichment, and you're going to need to learn things along the way of how can I get better at actually selling my products and services. These are all things that you will need to do in order to be a successful entrepreneur. Now the question is, after you list out all the things you're going to need to do, is how many of these am I actually willing to do? Because if you're not willing to do all of them, then you may need to modify what you want to have. Right? Because if you're a person who says, well, I want to be perfectly fit, and you say, I want to have six-pack abs, and one of the things that you need to do to have six-pack abs is you need to stop eating ice cream, but you're not willing to stop eating ice cream. Okay, are you willing to modify the results that you want based on the implementation modifications that you're making? You understand how that works? It's the same thing with the being part. So when you look at the things that you want to have in life, the results that you want to achieve in life, you got to ask yourself, all of the things that will be required for me to achieve these results, at least based on my reasonable knowledge, am I willing to actually do all of them? Because if anything I'm not willing to do, I'm gonna have to change my result. I'm gonna have to change the result that I want. It's like a person saying, I want to have a really big house on 3 acres with a really big lawn of lush green grass, but I'm not willing to cut the grass. I'm not willing to pay a landscaper. Well, then you may want to change what kind of house you want. Maybe you want to live in an apartment or a condo where the association or the management handles the grass cutting, so you ain't got to worry about that. Because if you're not willing to cut the grass, you probably don't want to live in a big house with a big lawn, right? Because somebody got to cut that grass. Somebody got to be responsible for that. Growth requires change, ladies and gentlemen. And this is where you get into some real conversation with yourself about what you are willing to change. Again, things you're willing to start doing, stop doing, and modify your doing. Maybe doing more or doing less. Growth requires some form of change, and that change could be removing, adding, as I just talked about. But human beings, we are creatures of habit. And what happens is we become resistant to change as we grow mentally older. I want you to notice the wording of that statement. We become resistant to change as we grow mentally older, not physically older. It's not about the number of candles on your cake, your birthday cake. It is about the way that you think. We become mentally older when we stop accepting change, when we stop implementing change, when we start holding steadfastly to the things of our present and our past, not because they are producing the results of what we want, but because they are allowing us to remain in our comfort zone. When someone becomes resistant to change just because they don't want to change, not because the change will make them worse, not because the change is a bad idea, not because they have done an analysis of the change and they have calculated that it would not help them, but because they just don't want to do anything different, that's when a person is growing old. You want to know if someone's old, just look at how much change they are willing to implement, how much change they are willing to accept, how they feel when change occurs. Because change is always occurring, right? So this is how you notice someone looks like a museum piece. They look like 5 years ago, and they think and talk like 5 years ago because the change has been happening all around them, but they have not adapted to it. So you want to know how old someone is, just look at how they have dealt with the inevitable changes of life. Somebody could be 25 years old and old. They could be 25 and old. And somebody could be 50 and younger than the 25-year-old simply because the 50-year-old is more willing to make change. They're more willing to adapt and adjust to change when it occurs. Since growth requires change, human beings being creatures of habit that can become resistant to change, while you may know what you need to be and who you need to be rather, it doesn't mean it's guaranteed that you will actually become it. How many people listening to me right now, you know what type of person you need to be to get to where you want to get to in life, but you have not become that person yet. And it's not because you're waiting on anything. It's not like you're waiting on a shipment from FedEx for you to become that person. You just haven't done it for whatever reason. You just haven't done it. You know you need to do it. You just ain't doing it. Who listening to me right now knows exactly what I'm talking about? Who am I talking to directly right now? Who knows that I'm talking about you? You know who you are. How many times in life have you told someone else, maybe yourself, exactly what needed to be done for that person to advance, and while that person clearly understood exactly what you said, they didn't do it? How many of you been in that situation? You told someone what they need to do. All right, you want to get better at shooting? All right, you need to shoot 500 jump shots a day, and they didn't shoot 500 jump shots a day. You told them they want to write a book. All right, you need to open Microsoft Word or Google Docs and just start fucking writing, make an outline, and start writing, and they didn't do it. You told them, all right, you want to get a podcast. Here's an article that tells you exactly how to start a podcast. Here's how you do it. Go ahead, do it. They didn't do it. How many of you know someone, you told them exactly what to do, they didn't do it? How many times have you been told exactly what to do something that you claimed you wanted to do, but you didn't do it? Yeah, I know. You can laugh at yourself. It's all right. We all do it. Point number 2. Today's topic is, who are you willing to be? Not who do you need to be, who are you willing to be? Number 2, what would you delegate/get rid of? Masterclass number 1253. The topic was how to do less in order to do more. For the high achievers amongst us, and I know that as many of you who listen to this show, you are usually doing too much. You are much more often doing too much than you are not doing enough. If you are not doing enough, it's usually you're not doing enough of the right things and you're doing too much of the extra stuff, and that extra stuff is taking up the time that you could be spending doing more of the right stuff. So the question is, who are you willing to edit out of your life? What edits are you willing to make in your life? What are you willing to get rid of in your life? What are you willing to delete? What are you willing to just cut out and never bring back? There's a movie called Lean On Me. I don't know if any of you are familiar with this movie. It's a movie from maybe the 90s or 80s. But the movie is about this guy named Mr. Clark. He is a school principal who is assigned to take over one of the worst schools. I believe this was in Los Angeles. Maybe it's in Chicago. I don't remember what city it was supposedly based in. It's a fictional story. I think it's a fictional story. Maybe it's not. But anyway, in this story, the school principal gets assigned to take over this really bad inner city school where the students are barely reading at the right levels. Nobody's going to college. It's a very underperforming school. The state is probably about to shut the school down. It's just a terrible school where nobody learns. There's a whole bunch of bad kids. There's all kinds of drugs going on and gangs going on. This place is not conducive to learning. okay? And Mr. Clark, the principal, the new principal, he's assigned to run this school. Now he knows he's basically being given a death sentence for his principaling career because there's no good in this school. It's kind of like, I told you the story how John Wooden, the legendary UCLA basketball coach, he won all those championships. Someone asked him, Coach Wooden, what is the key to winning so much as a basketball coach? And he said, well, the key is to have the best players. Well, Mr. Clark had the worst players. All right, so there's no amount of coaching that can coach up terrible talent. He had terrible talent on his hand, metaphorically speaking. Now, these kids, who knows? Maybe these kids could have been great, but they were in a terrible environment to be great, and he was being thrown into this environment and being told to be in charge of it. He was just being dealt a losing hand. So Mr. Clark, when he first started the job, on the first day he called an assembly. And any of you been to school know what an assembly is, right? It may not be assemblies anymore now after COVID, right? But there was this assembly. He calls all the students into it's a high school, into the auditorium. And on stage though, he has all the worst students, all the students who have been continually missing school, skipping class, getting detention, getting suspended, getting in fights, disrespecting the teachers, disrespecting their fellow students, just all the bad kids. They're all standing on stage. Now they're all on stage and they're hamming it up. They love this. They're like, yeah, I'm getting all the attention. This is what they were doing anyway. They're acting out and getting attention for acting out. So Mr. Clark finally comes up on the stage and he says to the students sitting in the audience, these are the students who haven't been acting out. He says, these students you see on stage, they have been continually terrorizing classes. They've been disrespecting you, disrespecting the teachers, acting out, getting suspended, not coming to school, not doing their schoolwork. These are just the lowest of the low of all the students in the school. And all y'all know it because y'all deal with them. Y'all been in class with them every day, at least when they show up to class. Y'all know who they are. They know who they are. They're proud of it. You are aware of it. And these are the worst students. So here's what I'm going to do. This is Mr. Clark, mind you. This is his first day at the job. He said, from this point forward, as of right now, all of these students are dismissed from this school. He kicked all of them out of school. He kicked all of those students out of the school right there on the spot. There's like 100 or 100 plus students standing on the stage. He's like, all y'all don't go anymore. All of you are expelled from my school. Kicked all of them out. Now, one of the students who was sitting in the crowd, she was a student who actually, wanted to learn and seemed like she had some home training. When Mr. Clark did that, she said, oh, Mr. Clark is serious. This guy doesn't play. He's for real. This guy actually wants to do something. He's not going to keep tolerating these clowns who are destroying our school. Now, the movie goes on from there. You can go watch the movie if you want. You probably found it on YouTube or Amazon somewhere or something like that. But the whole point is this. Mr. Clark knew he was being dealt a bad hand as the principal of that school. In school that wasn't doing too well. And he knew that if he went in there and tried to play the hand that he had been dealt, it wasn't going to work that well. So he said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take all of the bad cards that I've been dealt and I'm going to throw all of them back in the pile. And he threw all of those bad kids out of the school on the first day. Now my question is for you. On the heels of that story, what bad cards are you going to throw in from the hand that you're playing right now called your life? What bad cards do you have that you like, you know what, I'm gonna stop playing these cards, let me play some different cards. Steve Jobs, famously, when he returned to Apple to triumphantly bring the company back from the brink of death, Apple was about to go out of business. They were doing so terrible after they had kicked out Steve Jobs many years after kicking him out. What did Steve Jobs do? Any of you who knows the story, you know what he did. He took all the products that Apple was selling, and there were a lot of them at that time, and he cut all of them out of their product line. He narrowed Apple's product line down to 4 products. Yes, 1, 2, 3, 4. Everything else he cut out. He said, we're no longer selling any of these other products. We're only going to sell these 4 products. That's it. And that simplicity, first of all, helped the customer, so the consumer could look at what Apple was offering, and it was easy for them to make a decision. And it helped push Apple forward because now all of Apple, everyone who worked there, everyone who sold the products in the stores, people who worked for the company, there was a lot of clarity as to what exactly Apple was about and what exactly Apple was doing. That clarity helped them, but it worked because Steve Jobs was willing to edit some things. He was willing to kill some of his sacred cows or some of Apple's sacred cows and simplify everything, not only for himself and the other people who worked at Apple, but also for the consumer to make better, easier decisions. Kobe Bryant told the story of, this was probably around 2008, around that time. during his career when he was approaching age 30, and this is around the time that athletes, especially professional athletes who already have these great bodies, start to usually pay a little bit more attention to their bodies. These days, maybe it's happening a little bit sooner because we have more information. But Kobe told the story how when he was approaching 30, one day in the offseason, he ate a slice of pizza, and then the next day, he felt like shit, which is usually what happens. I think some people listening to this right now know that feeling. You eat some pizza for dinner or some wings or a burger for dinner, and you think that's enough. And then the next day, you feel like shit. You have no energy. You're sluggish. And you're like, you know what? It's because I ate that shit the day before. And Kobe said that's when I started getting serious about my diet. After I ate that pizza and I knew I couldn't do that anymore. The whole point of that again is, what are you willing to edit out? Kobe edited, allegedly, at least according to his story, he edited the junk food and the pizza out of his diet. And I think we can agree Kobe Bryant was a pretty good athlete even after the age of 30. Point number 3. Today's topic once again is, who are you willing to be? Number 3 is, what are you willing to add? What additions are you willing to make? Sometimes in life, there will be elements that you are missing that you need to add to your business or to your repertoire in order to move your business and your life forward. We all know that times change, and what used to work for you back then may not be enough anymore. For example, Michael Jordan. I'm sure many of you saw the 10-part series about Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls in the spring of 2020. Jordan told the story. He told the story many times. It wasn't just at the when the last dance happened, but he told the story of how he and his team were continuing getting their butts kicked by the Detroit Pistons, who were the best team, one of the best teams in the NBA in the late 80s, heading into the early 90s. And Jordan realized, you know what, if we keep getting our butts kicked by these Detroit Pistons, and we don't make any changes, I'm never going to win my championship. And Michael Jordan was hell-bent on winning a championship. So Michael Jordan figured, as the leader that he was, he knew that his teammates needed to get better, but he also realized that he couldn't force his teammates to get better. He couldn't force other people to do something that they either didn't want to do or they couldn't do or whatever. Michael Jordan said, all right, what can I do? So what Michael Jordan decided, based on asking himself a really good question, what can I do instead of trying to influence the outcome by getting other people to change? What can I do to change myself? Michael Jordan started lifting weights, and he went and found a trainer, a guy by the name of Tim Grover, who wrote a book called Relentless, which is a really good book. It's basically about Michael Jordan's mindset. He started lifting weights because he felt like he was taking too much punishment, and Michael Jordan got bigger, he got stronger, he got better, his teammates also got better, and then they started winning. They beat the Detroit Pistons, they started winning championships. The rest became history. 50 Cent told the story in his recent book, Hustle Harder, Hustle Smarter. He talked about how his core fans, after years of rapping, when he first came out in 2003, obviously he had his core fan base, sold a whole lot of records, but let's say around 10 years later, 50 Cent came to the realization, most of my core fans from back in 2003, they are not going to the club anymore. Remember, 50 Cent had the famous song called In the Club, which is probably the biggest record 50 ever made still to this day. And he realized, no, my fans aren't in the club anymore. They aren't doing it anymore. Some of them are married, they got kids, they're in family life. So on Saturday nights, they're not going to the bars and the clubs. They're at home watching Netflix and watching TV. So what did 50 Cent do? He started making TV shows and started making movies because that's where his core fans were at. And I think that's a pretty astute observation by 50. LeBron James, in the 2011 NBA Finals, when his first year with the Miami Heat, they went to the finals and they played against the Dallas Mavericks. And the Dallas Mavericks came across a formula for stopping LeBron James that no one had ever thought about. Take a guy who was a lot smaller than LeBron James and guard LeBron with that guy, because LeBron, number one, doesn't have a post game, and number two, LeBron had not figured out how to take advantage of a smaller player guarding him. So when the Dallas Mavericks put these little small guys on him who were giving up 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 inches of height to LeBron James could not do anything to take advantage of that. And the Miami Heat ended up losing the NBA Finals because LeBron couldn't figure out how to outplay these smaller guys on defense. It was a crazy idea, but it actually worked against LeBron James. But what did LeBron James do? He figured that out. In the next 2 years, they won the championships. And LeBron has been a pretty good player. He added to his game so that you couldn't take advantage of him in that way anymore. But let me be clear with this, even though this third point is what are you going to add, doesn't mean in life that you should always add things to your game. All right, maybe sometimes you might be thinking about adding something to your game, and it'd be better if you just sat that one out and didn't add anything. I'll give you an example. Google. Some of you remember Google Plus. Remember Google Plus? When Google wanted to get into the social media game, we had Facebook, we had Twitter. I don't think Instagram was even out yet when Google Plus came out. And I always hated Google Plus. Google Plus doesn't exist anymore, and I still hate Google Plus. It's dead, and I hate it. All right, Google Plus was a fail because Google went to make an addition when they should have just stuck with what they were already doing. NBA players trying to make rap albums, that is a fail. Every NBA player who made a rap album, it was a fail. Okay, rappers claiming that they can play in the NBA, another fail. NFL wide receivers talking about they can play in the NBA, fail. Sometimes in life you need to just stick to what you're doing and not try to do extra. Sometimes in life you just need to do less. All right, sometimes you need to just keep doing what you're doing. Don't do less, don't do more. Just do the same thing that you're already doing and just step your focus up. But sometimes we overreach when we're trying to add. So yes, there are times to add and there are times not to add. That requires your skill of what we call discernment. If you didn't hear the masterclass on discernment, or you did, you don't remember everything I said, listen to it again. That is masterclass number 1431, discernment, your skill of perception and judgment. Again, 1431. Let's recap today's class, which is, who are you willing to be? Point number one, when you ask the need to be question, you must follow this up with, of these things that I need to be, which ones am I actually going to implement? Because just because you wrote it down and said you need to do it, doesn't mean you're actually going to do it. That willing part is where you get into some real conversation with yourself, because growth requires change, and that may require additions and removals from your life. But humans being creatures of habit, it does not mean we're actually going to implement those things, because people do not change easy. Point number two, what will you delegate / get rid of? Masterclass number 1253, how to do less to do more. For the high achievers amongst us, you are usually doing too much more than you are not doing enough. If you are actually not doing enough, it's usually you're not doing enough of the right things, which already exist. You're doing too much of the extra stuff, which also exists. And then that extra is taking up that additional time that you could be using on the right things. Mr. Clark and Lean On Me got rid of all the bad kids on day one. Steve Jobs, when he came back to Apple, got rid of every product except four of them. Kobe Bryant was eating pizza, said, I gotta get rid of pizza if I'm gonna keep being Kobe for the rest of my career. Are you willing to make those edits to your life? Point number three, what will you add to your life? Sometimes in life, there will be elements that you are missing that you need to add to your business in order to move your business / life forward. Times change, and what worked back then may not be enough anymore. Michael Jordan was recognized as the best player in the world, but he hadn't won a championship yet, and he realized he needed to start lifting weights and get bigger and stronger, even though he was already the best player, in order for his team to win. 50 Cent realized that his core fans weren't in the club anymore, so he needed to make TV shows and movies because they were all at home now. They weren't out at the club every Friday and Saturday night. LeBron James couldn't post up a smaller player in the 2011 finals. He realized he needed to add a post game to his skill set so that couldn't be used against him anymore. But that does not always mean you need to add something to your game. Google added Google Plus. It was called Google Plus. It was adding something, and it was a fail. They should not have done that. Sometimes in life, you add things and it's not a good idea. NBA players add rapping to their resume. Fail. Rappers try to add NBA player to their resume. Fail. Football players talking about they can play in the NBA. NBA players talking about they can play in the NFL. Fail, 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 fail. Sometimes in life you should not add. Sometimes you just stand pat and play the hand that you have. That is a skill of discernment, your skill of perception and judgment. That is masterclass number 1431. You want to get better at knowing who you are as a person, being able to look into your own philosophy, know when it's time to add, when not to add. I suggest you read my book, Dre Philosophy Volume 0. You can get that at workonmygame.com/DP, which stands for Dre Philosophy. I would also suggest you can take my 30 Days of Discipline course, which you can access at workonmygame.com/30, the number 3, number 0, workonmygame.com/30. That is the 30 Days to Discipline course. Work on your game. Dre all day.